This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
Aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. Balance those three things in this exposure triangle correctly, and you can take a sharp and perfectly exposed photograph. But you can also manipulate each of these to achieve a desired style or effect. So today we're gonna talk about breaking a shutter speed rule to create 3 dope shutter speed effects that you can do all in camera. First up, the follow shutter. Now, this technique is one of my favorites for car photography, or really anything moving past that you can track with your body. This effect gives off the feeling of speed or movement. Now, it can also give a photograph direction by providing leading lines with the motion. Now, to achieve this, set your shutter speed to something between 1/15 or 1/50th of a second. The exact shutter speed will depend on how fast the object is moving, how close you are to that subject, and how much motion blur you want in that photo. The slower the shutter speed, the more motion blur you will achieve. But that will make it more challenging to get your subject in focus as well, so keep that in mind. Now, if it's a super fast race car, for example, you'll probably be good with the shutter speed at 1/40 or 1/50. And if it's just like a human walking from right to left in front of you, then you might want a bit slower of a shutter speed, so say 1/15 or 1/30. Now, all you have to do is pan the camera at the same relative pace that the object is moving throughout your composition, and snap the photo during that movement. Think of it as trying to keep the subject, in this case, like the race car, in the exact same part of the frame while it's moving on the track. Now, because your camera is moving with the subject, but the background is staying in the same place in relation to your camera, the shutter stays open long enough to capture that movement of the background, like dragging across the frame. Now, this will take some trial and error to get the perfect photo, of course, but the results are totally worth it. If there's not enough motion blur, then just lower your shutter. And if there's too much motion blur, then raise your shutter to a higher number. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that whatever axis your subject is moving along, try not to move the camera at all in the opposite axis, because this will cause the entire photo to be out of focus, and we don't want that. Next, we have the long exposure shot. Now, you may be more used to hearing the term long exposure when you're shooting like a dark environment and need to let more light into your image, say a night sky, for example. However, this is great for when you want to smooth motion in a photo, like a waterfall. Now, the most common examples of this are, like I just mentioned, with water and or light trail photography. Now, to achieve this look, you want to set your shutter speed to something between 2 and 5 seconds, sometimes even longer if the subject isn't moving as much as you would want it to be. So shots like these really just need 2 things. You need a tripod so that the camera stays as steady as possible to ensure that the parts of the image that aren't moving stay sharp. And number 2, you need a timer or a shutter release cable to ensure that you don't like jiggle the camera when pressing the shutter button. Now, this third one is optional. So if you're shooting during the day, you might require an ND filter because the shutter is open for such a long period of time and letting in so much light. So the ND filter will allow you to keep your other settings like your aperture and your ISO at the correct setting. Now, this isn't that big of a deal at nighttime, however, since, like it's pitch black outside anyways. And if you would like more information on how ND filters work, by the way, then click this video right up here.
You enjoying this video? Cool. Couple things I'm gonna ask you to do then. 1, maybe subscribe to my channel. 2, listen to me talk about Squarespace for a minute. Thanks. I used Squarespace to make my website. I legitimately did, even before they paid me to do this ad. The template I chose was clean and stylish, and I literally built it myself. I really struggle with design, but Squarespace made it super easy for me to showcase my portfolio beautifully. The platform is super easy for me to customize, update regularly, and I can get analytics about the purchases made on my digital products through my online store. And I run my own business, so I don't have time to learn a whole new platform. All right, so head over to Squarespace for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can use this code right here to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks, Squarespace. Now back to the video.
Next, we have quite literally the opposite of the last effect, and that is to freeze motion using a super fast shutter speed. Now, this technique can give you the effect of freezing time because, well, that's kind of what you're doing with the shutter speed that high. You're gonna wanna set your shutter speed to something like 1/2500 or 1/4000. So the faster your shutter speed, the sharper your moving subject will be captured. The effect this gives is that whatever you shoot at these shutter speeds will appear frozen in space. face. The reason it looks so cool is because your eyes don't freeze motion, so we never actually get to experience what that looks like unless we use a camera with a super high shutter speed. So keep in mind that with shutter speeds this high, the camera doesn't have a lot of time to capture and let in light. So make sure that you're shooting in a situation with a lot of light. Outdoors during the day works great for this, or use a super bright light. Now, if you've made it this far, congratulations. Here is your bonus tip. Number 4, and this is my personal favorite because it can be the hardest to achieve, but honestly has the best payoff. This is where you have a subject, say a model, and they stay super still and in focus in the frame. And then everything or everyone around them continues to move, creating blur for the background of the image. Now, this creates contrast between the stillness of the subject and the movement of the space around them. So some common scenarios for you to try this technique out would include cars or a train passing by behind your subject, or traditionally, usually a crowd of people. Now, I recommend a shutter speed at around 1/15 to 1/30. So this is slow enough that it'll capture the motion for the background elements while also not being too slow for your subject so that they don't need to stay like crazy still for a long period of time. Again, with all of these tips, trial and error are everything. It's going to take some patience to get your settings right depending on the situation and lighting and environment you're in, and to have all of those environmental elements just in the right place. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys want more beginner photography tips, then please subscribe to this channel, like this video if you liked it, and subscribe. Did I say that already? I think I did. Please leave a comment. I like you. Thanks for being here. Bye.